Welcome to Your Best Life podcast, where we help you discover your calling so you can live with purpose and clarity. We're Pete and Julie Morrill, your guides, mentors, and lifelong adventurers, and we're here to help you find your true north. We're going to get started as soon as Pete turns off the basketball game, which he just did.
All right. Well, welcome to Your Best Life podcast. We're with Julie again. We're doing her second session of life coaching. And just so you know, when you life coach with me, generally there's some homework that you do. And today I've asked Julie to write down some of her answers. So much of what we're doing is reflecting on some of the things that she's already thought through. The reason is I want her to kind of do some deep thinking, and then I'm trying to drive that thinking just a little bit deeper. Are you ready to go, Julie?
I am.
Was this a little less emotional than the first time?
I was going to say, I promise not to be all weepy like I was last time.
All right, well, don't make too many guarantees. Yeah, so the way I started the coaching session is I gave kind of a familiar biblical parable. A parable is just a story that's got kind of a deeper meaning to it. And it's about a ruler, and he's got some servants or employees. And one of them he gives 5 talents, one of them he gives 2 talents, and one of them he gives 1 talent. It says he goes away for a period of time. He comes back, and he asks them, what have they done with the talents that he's given? And one of them says, look, I've taken the 5 talents, and now I've doubled it. And the other one says, I've taken the 2 talents, and now I've doubled that. And the third one said, I was a little bit nervous about the talents you gave me. I know that you're not an easy man to get along with, so I buried the talent, and here it is. I have the 1 talent that you gave me. And so one of the questions that I asked Julie was, what do you get? What's kind of the main theme? What hits home for you out of that parable?
It always made me nervous that I wouldn't use my talents that God gave me in a way that doubled it or at least expanded them in some way.
Yeah.
I didn't want to bury them.
Yeah, and the opposite of using your talents well is burying them, right? And why did the one servant bury him?
He was afraid of his boss. He said that you're a hard man. Yeah.
And sometimes we're afraid of things, and we reflect on things that maybe are not exactly true. In other words, he's saying, I'm afraid of you. I've heard about your reputation. But sometimes people are just afraid to take a risk, right? And there are a lot of people that live their life in fear. And I think that the sense of the parable is we don't want to live in fear. We want to live in confidence that the talents have been given to us for a reason. In most people's life, through different seasons, right, they have perhaps buried some of their talents. And one of the things that I asked Julie was, what do you feel like has been buried most recently for you?
Because of my neck injury, I am definitely not hanging out with people more and meeting one-on-one. And that's actually one of my talents and gifts is just going deeper with people, and I'm physically not able to do that as well.
So why don't you explain what that means? What do you mean by your neck injury? No, what do you mean by your neck injury and why that's limited you?
So I've got bulging discs in my neck that cause so much pain that I wear a neck brace most of the time for the last 9 months, and I have to lie down a lot because being vertical adds too much compression to my neck and hits on those nerves and on the discs.
So you think your meeting with people has been somewhat extinguished, right? That's not the only thing that you said is somewhat buried.
Oh, what did I say?
You said you're missionary, the fact that you like interacting with people in different cultures.
Yeah, I mean, that has been buried for a longer time because of where we live. So we live in a place with very few different cultural groups, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
How
There's
do I
not
say?
much ethnic diversity. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so because of that,
Well, I really enjoyed working with refugees when I lived in LA and Sacramento, and when I was in college, I always had friends from different countries. And here, if I meet one, it's like, yay, I met somebody from another culture. It's very unusual to meet them where we live.
yeah. Yeah. And we mentioned one other thing, which was your creativity. It was a little bit buried.
A little bit, yeah, but I've pulled it back out and started working on it. But it's been buried for various reasons. One is rejection from publishers. So after a few rejections, or several, I put it away, buried it almost.
So
on
publishing
purpose.
a book was what you were trying to do, yeah. Okay. So you at this point feel like the writing part of your creativity has been buried a little bit, but there's another part to your creativity that's become alive.
Oh yeah, that part where I'm writing more, and podcasting is bringing up some of that creativity that has been buried. So it's allowed me to resurrect it.
So when we look at our talents that are buried, in almost every season, some talent is a little bit buried. In other words, we would think that most people have, in the parable 5 to 1, but most people have multiple talents, right? So what do we do when it's not our choice that things are buried?
Well, if it's me, I complain a little bit.
Okay.
And I cry a little bit, but I had to adjust, I guess, pivot a little bit and just find what talents can I use right now, because I can't use certain ones.
Yeah. And you got to get creative, right? You got to think about, okay, is there other ways? And so this podcast is a form of creativity, right? And it also is a form of you saying, this is what we're doing now. So I'm going to funnel maybe my writing creativity into more of a podcast or a creative outlet like that. Sometimes we bury things unintentionally ourselves. Have you ever found yourself burying something unintentionally?
Are you hitting me with these questions?
Well,
I don't know what you mean. I don't know what I would answer.
This is where I would say, because I'm an observer of your life, I would say your writing you bury sometimes because of what you say is rejection from publishers, right? Is there ways that can be? So that's a fairly common thing, that people want to write a book. And it's a fairly common thing that people get rejected multiple times. Even very famous authors have generally been rejected multiple times. When do you know whether it's a gift that should be buried or a gift that shouldn't be buried?
Well, for me, I can't help myself. I just keep writing anyway.
Right.
I bury it for a short time and I just can't do it.
Right.
I have to write. It's not just a creative outlet for me, but I think it's oxygen for me.
Right.
I need to express my ideas and creativity in some way, and the best way is through writing for me.
So it's a talent that you haven't had the freedom to totally bury, but it is a gift that sometimes gets buried, right? Because if you're doing it for your own creative outlet, it's not really a gift that you're giving to somebody, right? So it's maybe not a talent that's invested. But why would you do it for your own entertainment if it wasn't going anywhere?
I think part of it is for my own sanity.
Okay, good.
So,
and also, I think almost every writer would say you have to be writing consistently to be a good writer, right? In other words, maybe it's a talent that God hasn't positioned it to be used right now, but He wants to sometimes position us with the skill and then just encourage us to stay faithful with that skill. In some ways, you cannot not write, right? You've kind of said that. It helps you enjoy life better if you're writing regularly. Not a gift that you can give to somebody at that point, other than it's a sharper version of yourself. And now when there are opportunities to write, your writing skills are more honed, perhaps. All right.
But I did want to say something else about that.
Okay.
Because my mind's always going with creative ideas, I have a creative idea for my writing. It's not exactly traditional publishing. I don't know if I'll go into it right now, but it has excited me and given me a spark and a motivation to write with a new energy again. Okay.
And that's one thing I would encourage everybody. When you have a talent and it's almost an obsession, right? That writing is almost an obsession for you. Keep leaning into it. Keep honing the craft. And perhaps at some point you're going to see an opportunity where you can sneak it in a big way or in a small way. And it sounds like you've found at least an opportunity to start sneaking your writing in a different way, different form than you thought.
It gives me the opportunity to make my writing a selfless gift. Right. And I think that's what is motivating me. It's no longer just for my own enjoyment.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to coach people on is writing is not a calling. Writing is a gift that you can give to help fulfill your calling. And it might be a big part of the calling, but usually, like you said, the writing is to accomplish something. There's a why behind it, and then there's a who behind it. That is the gift that you're giving it to, and the writing is the what that you're giving, right? So a lot of times when you think about, I've been given this skill, this ability, this obsession, why have I been given it? Okay.
Well, it's more the message than the actual vehicle of writing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and perhaps you will do writing for just the fun of it, or just for the self-entertainment, or for the honing of the skills. And then perhaps you'll write to fulfill your calling, which will be when you're really packaging it up as a gift. I think a lot of people, when they think of life calling, they think of one thing: I'm a teacher, or I'm a writer, or that's the method with which you're fulfilling your calling. That's the skill, one of the skills you're bringing to that calling. And so why is it important for you to keep writing?
Well, I guess it's a number of things, because I do it for my own enjoyment, but I'm also obsessed with getting the creativity out. I also have a message that I want to share. It's mostly entertainment because I write fiction, but is that answering your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
And why is it important for you to think about people who are in different cultures? Because that's another one of your unique fascinations.
And that goes in my writing too.
Right.
I can't help myself there either. I'm so fascinated with other cultures. So I have to, I like the stacking of it. I've got the writing, the international people and cultures. I have the creativity of what I'm doing that I'm not mentioning right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you say stacking, we're going to call it alignment. Okay. So the more we're going to set your compass, we're going to give you your life calling, the more you're going to say, is this that I'm doing here? And is this that I'm doing here? And is this, are they things that I can bring in alignment with my life calling? And oftentimes it takes creative thinking in terms of how to do that. That's a lot of what I try to get people to do. Now, when we go through the whole QUEST process, right? QUEST is an acronym. So we're on E. But why don't you remind me what Q and U stand for?
So Q stands for 3 big questions.
Okay, which are?
Who am I? What is my calling? And what difference will it make?
Right.
The U is your unique personality.
right?
The
Your
E,
unique story.
oh, sorry, unique
Yeah.
story. I jumped ahead
That's
in
right.
my brain to E is your emotional grid, which is your personality.
Right. So, why do I want you to memorize those? Well, the easy answer is you don't go on a backpacking trip and put the compass in your backpack and keep it in your backpack the whole time, right? But most people have thought about their purpose, they've thought about their calling, they've thought about their mission, they maybe have even gone through some exercises. But for most people, the compass is in the backpack. And a compass in the backpack is a compass that doesn't really matter, right? It's not helping you give you direction today, right? So the reason I want you to memorize it is because it takes it out of the backpack and it puts it in your hands. So this is going to throw you off, but we've got three big questions, right? And the first question is, who am I? Mm-hmm. And to answer that first question, we say, what is your unique story? So what are some things that your unique story has told you about what needs to show up in your life calling?
I don't know which path to go on.
Yeah, go on a couple of them. That's okay.
I'm trying to talk about one that I haven't mentioned already. Because I grew up down the Klamath River, part of my life, and in that childhood, I had a teacher named Mrs. Kirkbride who really encouraged my writing and sent me to writers' workshops, and it opened up a whole new world to me. Like, I can actually write, and people are encouraging me to write. I mean, I thought it was just
even as a young child,
mm-hmm.
which is when your callings sometimes are in the purest form, mm-hmm. right? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, all I can say is from that point on, I was really more motivated to keep writing. I didn't really think about writing for publication until I was in my 30s. And that's when the rejection train started.
Yeah.
But I continued writing, and I look back at that beginning writing, and it was really bad. So I have come a long way. And good writers really do work on their craft for years before they can really be publishable. It's a process.
Yeah, and sometimes also, as you know, when you don't get published, it's sometimes nobody ever looks, in other words, publishers get lots of submissions.
I know that my writing was bad though, because I do look back at it, and I had some feedback from one person that was actually that teacher, Mrs. Kirkbride. And she said, Julie, you're a good writer. This is bad writing. It's like, oh, wow, that's really blunt. Okay. So back to the drawing board and just revising my whole entire manuscript so that now I feel like, oh yeah, it would actually meet with Mrs. Kirkbride's approval now.
So when I asked the question, you said my unique story tells me that I may be called to write, create, encourage, inspire, and entertain. Now here's the word that I don't like in there. I may. Mm-hmm. Why do I not like that word?
Do you want me to be more decisive?
Well, I want you to know that has been given to you, right?
But my confidence is lower, yes.
Because the may word is a little bit, make it easier to bury things, right?
Interesting.
Because, and I would say 40 to 60% of people live with many of their talents buried because they have a may word. I may be called. I may be called says it's a possibility. It might be an eventual thing in my life, right? It could be something that I could stumble across.
It becomes a good excuse for procrastination
or for self-deprecation or a variety of different things. But when you say, I have been called to write, to create, to encourage, to inspire, to entertain.
But I'm not really sure, because that's why we're going through this.
Well, it is why we're
process.
going through this, but I don't want to teach you bad habits in terms of when you talk about your calling, you don't talk about things that you may eventually, possibly, maybe it's a slight, could be if the wind blows the right way. Those people don't change lives. Those people don't give great gifts away because they're not convinced enough that they've got the goods, right? And I want you to get in the habit of saying, I
really can.
it would be incredibly amazing that your calling doesn't include writing, right? That's just not even in the realm of possibility. You may not be able to write quite in the same form all the time, but you're almost always, when you're going to be living in your calling, writing is going to be there, right? So let's get rid of these self-protective words like may. Does that make sense to you? Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Right. But that's why a coach, right? A coach says to the guy that just dropped the pass, you are a better receiver than that. Now go run the pattern and catch the pass the next time, right?
I don't understand your language.
Well, you know that if you drop a pass, it's not a good thing, right? And what he's saying is, you've got it in you, now go do it. And a lot of times, people cancel their calling in their brain before it even has a chance. They bury it, right? Because of fear. Maybe I'm not going to be successful. Maybe I'm going to reject it. Maybe I'm not going to get my book published. Maybe, and all of these things mean it gets just buried under more and more layers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And those layers, they seem a little bit familiar to you, don't they? Yeah. So that's why I want to camp on that word may. All the other words were great. That's the only word that I don't like. And I understand you're not totally sure about your compass setting yet. But let's be real. Writing is going to be in that compass setting in some form or another. So be confident about that.
One thing my mom used to say to me when I was little was, my middle name is May. So she would say, Julie May or Julie May not.
There you go. Okay.
It sounds like what you're saying.
Yeah, a little bit. So this is what you wrote as a summary of your personality. So what I like is we use a personality profile that actually uses about 5 different personality type. And so it can be, in some ways, confusing, but in some ways you're not taking just this personality test, you're taking 5 different personality tests. We put you through this grid, and then it spits out a personality summary based on each of those 5, and then a general summary. And then I asked you to summarize the summary, right? So and whenever you take a personality test, you want to make sure that you feel confident that what it's saying is true. And if it's not, it's okay, because they are just saying the way you responded to this question, we're projecting your personality. So sometimes that's right and sometimes that's wrong. And you have been a good example of sometimes you feel like really, this really nailed me. And then sometimes you say, I don't know. So
and also in your homework instructions, you said to edit that.
Right.
Completely take out lines that don't mean anything.
Get rid of the stuff that doesn't fit. In other words, this personality testing program that we use isn't some magical genius, right? It may or may not figure it out. It's going to do a pretty good job for most people. But what really matters is, are you digesting it? So one of the reasons I ask you to edit is because I want you to digest what is really true, right? And when you're editing what's there, it makes you think analytically, is this true of me or is this not true? So after you did that, you said, your summary of your personality based on their summary. I'm a curious, artistic soul drawn to encouraging individuals and small groups through meaningful conversations and spiritual exploration. Through creative and humorously entertaining storytelling and authentic, heartfelt communication, I invite others to reflect more deeply on who they are and how they engage with the world around them. What are the tools of your personality that invite others? So you said, I invite others.
I think the number one thing is asking people questions.
You are an incredible question. I won't say interrogator because that kind of is got a derogatory term or sense to it. But you're a good questioner.
Inquisitor, is that a word?
Yeah, interviewer probably is the best way. But even that has a kind of a professional. You're a good, I don't know. You're a curious person, basically, is what you say in here, right? Mm-hmm. And that explains it the best, right? What else? There's other things too. Well, what about this love for other cultures?
Well,
right?
I was going to say that kind of goes the same thing. I mean, if I'm going to meet somebody, and they're not from another country, I still am going to be interested in them and ask a lot of questions. But if they're from another country, that's just another level. Right.
And it's another level. And the other thing that you love to do is you love to learn, right? Mm-hmm. And so you are not just asking them questions, you really want to know the answer to whatever it is that you think might be of interest to them and of interest to you at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. So what you do is you jump into their world, right? Julie, when she was in college as a co-ed, I happen to know this because I'm her husband and she's told me this, she had a lot of guys that were they were anxious to get to know you more, right? And she said, I don't know why, all these guys. And I said, well, because you've got beautiful eyes and you ask a lot of questions.
I sound interested, a little too interested.
Well, and I think you genuinely are interested in whatever you're asking. You may not be that interested in them, and that was often the case, right? You were more interested in the subject than you were perhaps in
I did get into a lot of trouble at times with international students at UCLA because not only was I inquisitive anyway, but then they're from another culture. Who cares whether they're a guy or girl? I'm just going to ask you a lot of questions. Well, I guess in some of these other cultures, that means a lot more than what I intended.
Even in the U.S. culture, it means a lot more. Yeah. And again, because you really want to know, you're really engaging them, and you have a little bit of naivete in terms of how they might be reading those questions. But what a great way to invite people into a relationship, right?
And what a great way for anybody who's struggling with getting to know people. Mm-hmm. Just ask questions.
Just ask questions.
Maybe practice them ahead of time with somebody so they don't sound really crazy.
Yeah, and perhaps get to know the person. Now we can get to know people online before we even meet them in person. And one of the things that we've talked jokingly about is to do a little talk in terms of how to be better at dating, right?
I don't know if that's a joke. I think it's
a need. Yes, we both think it's a need. But really what dating is good ways to ask questions, a way to develop an inviting environment, to
smile a little bit,
ask questions. Yeah, exactly. You also said this, my emotional design suggests that my calling needs to include variety, lifelong learning, quiet reflection, and the opportunity to influence and inspire others through authentic relationships, creative productivity, and thoughtful insight. So when we are going to ask you, who are you? Remember, we're answering three big questions. we're going to say, what does your life calling tell you? And then we're going to say, what does your emotional grid tell you? This is a great thing to memorize. You might want to shorten it, right? And you're a writer, so you know how to edit. But my emotional design suggests that my calling needs to include variety. What does that mean to you?
I can't get bored.
Yes.
It's a big problem for me. I get bored very easily.
Lifelong learning.
Yeah.
Which
if I'm not learning something new, if I've heard it before, I can't handle it too well.
This one's a little bit. Go ahead.
I'm just going to say I have to give a caveat because I get bored very easily with sermons. And I have heard the material before, so it's not about the material being a problem. It's the presentation.
You're not learning anything fresh, but yet if whoever was sharing that sermon was giving you new information, you might become engaged in a different way,
or presenting it in a
creative way,
more creative way.
Yeah, quiet reflection.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the quiet reflection show up?
I think I'm an introvert, so I just need to be alone, first of all. But I also like being outside, going for walks, just being in nature. I think that's a time for reflection, and I do a lot of prayer in those walking times and just quiet time with God in the morning, usually.
An opportunity to influence and inspire others through authentic relationships. This is one that you said you've been kind of lacking lately, right?
I haven't been coaching.
Yeah.
I have only coached one person semi-consistently over the last 9 months. And that always thrills me, actually. Mm-hmm. So it does tell me that I'm more alive when I'm coaching somebody.
And you mentioned you don't mind hearing information if it's creative. And you said creative productivity and thoughtful insight. Those are things that you value. We're going to talk about values later, but those are things that you really value. If somebody is giving me a lesson, do it in a creative way. Make me think at a deeper level.
Yeah,
right?
It's not always an entertaining way. It's hit me with something that makes me really think more deeply about it, but also pause and give me a chance to digest that.
And that's where sometimes the entertainment might come in. Give me a little joke or give me something that kind of allows me to think about it, but then rest on it a little bit.
Or picking on pastors a little bit today.
You are, not me.
I am, yeah, sorry. But sometimes a pastor will make a point that's so profound, and then they just move on so fast. I don't have time to think about that. If they would just pause and say, think about that. Yeah. Give me a chance.
Or maybe even give you a little illustration of somebody who's dealt with that truth in their life or something like that. When you read this statement, I just read it for you, you wrote it. What encourages you?
And I think I'm encouraged that I am heading in that direction towards my calling. I'm not 100% in it, doing it, but even when I'm injured and recovering from an injury, I can still be working toward it, even just in a small way.
And what discourages you about it?
That there are some things that I could be doing that I'm not.
Well, and you may not read this, but your neck problem has caused you to socially withdraw a little bit more, right? And the thing that you miss the most is the authentic relationships, is what you reflected on. And we're always going to find ourselves in a season where certain things are buried. Sometimes we bury them deeper than they need to be buried, because while you've been promoting the podcast, you've been reconnecting with people. And you've had some pretty deep deep conversations, right? Yeah. And the fact that your neck was injured didn't really matter, right? So in some ways, sometimes we think our life calling has to go this path, right? And sometimes we have got to use that creativity and say, okay, now that my circumstances have changed, how can I still align with who I am? Make sense? I feel encouraged that I can write creatively and productively in the midst of my recovery from this injury. So in some ways, what you're saying is the injury might help, right?
Kind of.
There's always these things where negatives can become positives, right?
I'm having to lie down a lot with my laptop in my lap, and there I am typing away, getting new, fresh ideas to write about. So it's not all bad.
Yeah, John Maxwell writes a book called Failing Forward,
right? Yeah.
Right? And you kind of think, well, you're not going forward when you're failing, but he wants you to think that when there's a failure, there's probably an opportunity there. That if you get so focused on the failure or the disability or the challenge or that person or whatever it is, you often can't see what the positive side of that is. And that book for us, from when we rewrote the script on our business, was pretty significant to me as we were failing. The business was failing. You wrote some words, so we asked your AI, we asked an AI to give you what would be challenging aspects of your life calling, right?
Plug your ears.
Yeah. And then you wrote to yourself. So I'm going to read what you wrote to yourself. Remember, Julie, life is about relationships more than tasks. Why is that important for your personality to hear that?
I'm very, very task-driven. Task-driven.
Yeah.
Not tax-driven.
No, well.
Very, very task-driven. And I can forget about relationships with people because I just want to get this
Even
done.
your own husband, sometimes you forget about relationships with.
I don't
She
forget.
is, for being such a personable person, you can be, when you get on a task, you can be very dogged about that task. And what's good about that is you get the task done. What's bad about that is maybe you did it and you burned the reason you were doing it, right? Yeah. Because most of the time when we're giving our selfless gift, we're giving it to somebody, right? So if we burn the relationships because we're so task-driven, and I have that tendency too, it comes out differently than you want. This was another Julie coaching Julie statement. It's okay to make mistakes. Okay, what does that mean?
It's easier for me to make mistakes now and forgive myself, but it's taken me over 50 years to learn that, and I still am learning. So that's for most of my life, I have felt like I can't make mistakes.
Sometimes people have said the enemy of success is perfection. And if you think about that, you think, man, I always want to do something successfully. But how often do you do things perfectly? Really, how often do you have a perfect day? You know, you think about how many days have I lived in my life? How often have I lived a day that I would consider perfect? Almost never, right? But you can still have a very successful day. But sometimes we bury things. We bury our own accomplishments. We bury our own talents. We bury who we are because it can't meet up to our standard, which is sometimes way higher than the standard of the people that we're aiming to meet, right? So Julie, you know this, so I'll basically explain this to people, is when we have you do a personality test, we're not having you do one personality test, we're actually having you do answer questions that gives you analysis from 5 different well-known personality tests. Julie and I deal with 2 of them. I am actually dealt with a good bit with the DISC test. And Julie has dealt a good bit with the Enneagram. Why don't you talk about the Enneagram? I'll talk about the DISC, and then we'll talk about the other ones a little bit.
Okay, I'm not an expert in the Enneagram, but I will quickly go over what I know of it. So there are 9 personality types to the Enneagram, and they go in this order, starting with 1. The type 1 is very, I would call type C on the DISC test, because they are perfectionists. They want things done right, and they believe in a more black and white thinking of right and wrong. That's really in a nutshell. And so then we go to number 2. The type 2 is somebody who's very personable and loving and caring and very much relational with people, and often more on a one-on-one basis. And the type 3 is somebody who's very driven by success and achievement and the praise of others, and usually very competitive. And then the type 4 is usually very creative, romantic, idealistic, and thinks often to the past in nostalgic ways, and so very artistic. And then the type 5 is very introspective, which the 4 can be also, but the 5 more so. They need more alone time because they're drained very quickly by a lot of things, actually, but by being around a lot of people. They often are very good at research. They usually love to learn, and they just also think very deeply about things, spiritually and scientifically or whatever. And then the type 6 is a personality that is known for being very cautious and careful and conscientious, and also very humorous and witty. They can think on their feet very quickly. The 7s are the very playful, outgoing, need to be with people personality, the otter type personality. And they are also very creative, and they are energized by being with people. Very adventurous and eager to try new things and go new places and do new things. But they love variety so much that they just don't thrive in a structured environment at all. Okay, so then we move on to the 8. Strong, decisive, leader type of personality, and they can have a softer side that's very compassionate and sympathetic. Well, compassionate, maybe not sympathetic, because that's what you are. But they take charge and very quickly and easily in a situation, and they can see the big picture rather than the little details. For the most part, they just see big picture. Let's get it done, and let's motivate all these people to get going. So finally, there's the Enneagram type 9, who is very calm, steady, relaxed, laid back, easygoing, and really, really doesn't like change, and would prefer to make very little effort in a lot of areas of life. Those are the negatives, I would say. But they are also probably the most relational type of Enneagram type, because often they will be the counselors, therapists, that type of personality that's deeply, deeply caring with people, and is so chill and laid back that they have the time to just relax and hang out with you, ask lots of questions, and listen.
The Enneagram is an ancient kind of way of seeing personalities. The DISC test is as well, although in a different structure. But the DISC test basically has 4 personalities, and then it combines these 4. And I like to put animals with them because I think the animals are more memorable. But the D is an eagle. In classic, you'd call it a cleric. The eagle sees the big picture, is not as concerned about relationships, but he's concerned about strategy and accomplishment and getting things done is the big thing. Then the I is the sanguine, and that's the otter. This is the person that wants to play, is very relational, has lots of relationships. They may not be as deep as some of the other personality types, but they know everybody and everybody knows them. The S, I call it the horse, is the steady person. This is the person that just they have the lifelong relationships. They write letters to people. They're constantly encouraging. Relationships are very important to them, but long-term relationships are more important to them. And the C, I call the beaver. The beaver is the one that likes to do things right. Their motivation is doing things right. And they're very methodical. They're very, the more that they can know exactly what their role is and how that fits together. And in this personality thing, you're always going to say, in my case, I'm a high D with an S and a C, or I'm an eagle, horse, beaver, or sometimes eagle, beaver, horse, depending on what my relationships are. There's 3 other personality tests that we know less. I've done the Myers-Briggs. And we just won't comment on these because we don't know that much about them. But when we give you this tool, you can dig deeply into any of these 5. And what we like about this tool is it gives you a lot more information than what we're going to deal with. And so, and it's on a completely separate program, so you can dig into it. But it's one of them's called the Myers-Briggs. The other one's called the Holland, and then one's called the Big 5. And because we're not that familiar with them, we would choose to let you research them as you would like. But those are the personality types. So the question, Julie, from all of that explanation is, why is knowing your personality how is that going to change your life?
I personally think that knowing your personality is knowing who you are. And like you're telling me, even in this coaching, I need to spend time with myself and get to know myself and care for myself.
You need to give yourself what you said you need to give yourself, which is quiet times of reflection.
Yeah, I think that you have to know yourself, and one way to do that is through getting to know your personality type. And there are lots of different tools and personality tests, but it's just one more way to help you. If you know your personality types, it helps me know how to relate to other people once I know that person's personality type, because they can clash unless you have an understanding and respect.
Yeah, in our workplace, we would always do the DISC test, because then I would know what the primary motivations of people were. And when I did conflict resolution or I did management, I need to try to look at the situation through the motivations that I know. And I'm a fairly analytical person, and so that helps me. Okay, they're looking at it from how can we have the most fun, or how can we get this done, or how can we get it done right, or how can we make sure that everybody's cared for in the process. Those are the 4 major motivations of the DISC people. And so I start to see people through those formats. One of the things that we like to do when we're asking you to process your life calling is we like to give the information to an AI program and then ask it to reflect back. The reason is you can punch at it and nobody gets offended. Like I could say something, and then if you say something negative,
AI did it.
Yeah, but we can both refine what AI gives us. And so we've asked AI, based on Julie's emotional grid, based on her unique story, what are 8 life calling statements? Then I asked you to take the 8 and get the 2 that you felt like were the best, and then I asked you to rewrite them. And for Julie, who's a writer, this is something that is helpful because she thinks with her pen as much. So here's the 2 that you gave: is helping others experience God through heartfelt storytelling, honest reflection, and creative spiritual expression. That's one. The other one was inspiring meaningful, authentic living through creative storytelling, deep wisdom, and heart-centered connection. Which one of those do you like the best?
Second one.
The second one. And why do you like it the best?
When you read the first one, it just felt like, where's the creativity and the spontaneity and the variety? It was just missing some things that make my heart beat.
Cool. So one of the things that we would say is, okay, what do you like about the first one that should be included in the second one? And remember, there's 8 of them. So she's already gone through this process. And the one reason I do this is I want you to think there's no perfect life calling statement. And we can always slightly improve. But the better is the shorter and the more that rings true. So when I read those out loud, you had already picked the first one and the second one. You said, oh, the second one, right? Yeah. So that's good, because that one is the one that rings true. Now you take that one and you start to shape it, okay? And for our next coaching session, you need to know your life calling statement. Now, it's not going to be the perfect one, and it might not be the one that we finish this course with, but I want you to have a memorable life calling statement, because we're going to start to use that one to orient how well are you living the roles and responsibilities that you have in your life in alignment with that life calling statement. What does that mean to you?
I still am having trouble figuring out how to combine writing and being alone with being a coach. I think they're both my calling. So are they just part of the same statement, even though they're 2 separate things?
Well, again, we're going to talk about alignment, not combining. So alignment means you take your roles and your responsibilities and you start to bring them closer to what your life calling statement points to. We're going to work through this in a somewhat scientific way, but remember, we may tweak your life calling statement. I'm going to ask you to start thinking about how to tweak your roles and responsibilities. So when I say the term roles and responsibilities, what does that mean?
You're my boss.
Right.
So
Well,
I'm done working
for your job, you have a role or responsibility to Marble Mountain Kennels, right? But you have other roles in life. So I want you to think about what are those and what are the top.
I'll go into those right now.
Right.
Yeah.
What are the top 8 or 10, and then how can we get those to start aligning? And then how can you put more energy to the ones that are more aligned and less energy to the ones that are less aligned? And I asked the question, what's been illuminating about this coaching so far? Okay. And here's what you said, is deep, genuine relationships are at the core of who I am. Okay. And I think you're also saying at this part in your life, you're missing those. So there's not great alignment in that area. Second thing you said is my calling is deeply tied to spiritual authenticity. I think this is becoming more and more obvious to you. Would you not say that that's true?
Yes.
Okay. Third one is I'm most fulfilled when I'm creating, encouraging, humorous, inspirational work that points people towards God, wisdom, and hope.
So that statement actually sounds more like my calling statement.
Well, it's more expansive for sure, right? These are just reflections on your calling. How would your life ideally have to change if you wanted to capitalize on those 3 observations?
I'd have to get better, I think. At not being injured.
You'd have to be healthy.
I think I like to be healthy.
Yeah.
My neck working again.
Okay.
Then I feel like I could do a lot of things that I have lists of things that I want to do once I feel better.
Okay. And what would the list work towards your life calling or away from your life calling?
I know we're going to discuss that because I can always morph something into something that's I can say is my calling, even though you may disagree.
Well, and honestly, that's a little bit of what life calling coaching is about, is morphing something, not just word, not just changing the definition of something, but really morphing it so it aligns more with who you are, or leaving it so you don't have to worry about it.
You know this about me. There are seasons in my life when I have more energy and I'm really not in pain that I can take on too much. And that's where I feel like now, like there's a backlog of being able to do a lot of things. So as soon as I'm feeling better, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The challenge with that, though, is I will say, is that could be as confusing as helpful, because you've made all these lists of things you want to do. So one of the things when you go backpacking is you think about how many days am I going to be gone? Where am I going? And what do I need? And you think about the bare essentials of that. And that gets you very aligned with, I need to sleep well. I need to eat well. I probably need to handle weather well. And I need to think about, is there some way for me to stay warm? Which would be handling weather in different kind of. So all of a sudden it narrows it down to, this is what is going to make me comfortable on this backpacking trip. And that's a lot of what we're doing in terms of life calling, is we're trying to say, what is the essence of who Julie is? And then how can we make sure that her backpack has those things in it? Right now, I think you're saying my backpack doesn't have authentic relationships, or at least as many as I would like. And part of it is because of your injury. But part of it might be because you're seeing your injury as a reason to not focus on that. And we're going to say, no, that's essential for your trip. You cannot function well without authentic relationships. So if that's essential and your neck is bad, then we've got to figure out a way to work around that problem, right? If you go on a backpacking trip and you sprain your ankle halfway through the backpacking trip, you don't die there. That's not your goal, right? Your goal is to say, now I have one less good ankle. How am I going to make it through the next 20 miles of this backpacking trip? And you figure it out.
Well, I know there are so many people with disabilities and just illnesses or something like that, and you still can fulfill your calling. So I think that's where we're both trying to encourage you. I am not in the best shape right now with my neck, but I'm enjoying this because this is helping. I hope it's helping you fulfill your calling. We're trying to help you figure it out as we're discussing it. And I hope that some of you are having aha moments and saying, even though I'm injured or ill right now or something, or my situation just doesn't allow for a lot of energy or something, I can still fulfill my calling. I can still work toward it, even in a small way, even when I'm not in the best situation.
And sometimes maybe even in a bigger way. You're familiar, and some of our listeners will be familiar with the Apostle Paul. And most people who are biblical scholars will say the Apostle Paul wrote his greatest work when he was in prison. Most people would say when they're in prison, that's enough of a liability that I'm done. I can't do my calling right now. My life is, and yet he probably had more influence on the movement called Christianity when he was in jail than any other time in his life. Well, that's a lesson for all of us to say, sometimes our liabilities can be imaginary if we really are convinced that our life calling it's what's in our backpack that's necessary for us to get to where we're going. And so I think in some ways your neck injury has challenged you, right? And in some ways it's maybe given you a false excuse to bury some things that need to be unburied for your very survival, but also for your calling, right? And we're going to try to also start to say that your survival and your calling really aren't all that different, because one of them is just for your own survival. When you think of survival, it's for your, can I make it through this? And we want you to say, no, your life isn't just, can I make it through this? Can I accomplish the part that I'm supposed to accomplish in life right now? And to be honest with you, we both need to be a lot worse off than we are to say, no, we can't accomplish any of what we're here to accomplish. So I hope this has been challenging. Honestly, it's going in a direction that I wasn't expecting it to go in. And sometimes coaching goes like that.
Hey, friends of Your Best Life podcast. This is Julie, just hopping on with a quick fun announcement. As you heard in today's coaching session with Pete, he's been helping me clarify and chase after my life calling, and one thing that's really come alive for me is a creative side project I've been dreaming up. It's a bit of a love letter to the place I grew up, our local community here in Siskiyou County, the Klamath River, and the folks I've come to know and cherish in these parts. A nostalgic, small-town style podcast full of quirky characters, clean storytelling, and the occasional cow jailbreak. If you enjoy feel-good fiction and old-time country charm, I think you're going to love it. And if you want behind-the-scenes sneak peeks, be sure to follow me on Facebook, maybe Instagram, and YouTube. Links are in the show notes below. Big thanks to my calling coach and husband, Pete, for encouraging me to bring this vision to life. I highly recommend him if you're looking to get clear on your own life purpose. So stay tuned, and thanks for being part of this journey with us. We want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Today's episode of Your Best Life was brought to you by True North Quests, helping you discover your calling so you can live a life filled with purpose. Find out more at tnadventures.org, where you can book an appointment with a calling coach, learn about upcoming True North Quest workshops, and more. And by Marble Mountain Kennels, where exceptional Labrador retrievers are bred and trained for adventure, companionship, and service. Visit mmkennels.com to meet your new best canine friend. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, remember your best life starts with knowing your calling and finding your true north.